Hello and welcome to episode 144 of My Circus, My Monkeys. So, last episode, I had a guest who talked about keeping your nervous system regulated. And if you've been listening for a while, you know I cover topics like this and things like emotions, stress, energy, strengths, the stories we tell ourselves, and all sorts of things that might have some folks wondering, OMG, when is Anne actually going to get to the supervisor stuff? So today, I want to dive into why I talk about the things that I do. So stay tuned. 7 years ago, I left campus to start Strengths University. And when I left, I dove headfirst into business stuff. I never owned my own business or run one. So I figured that that's where I needed to focus my energy to be successful. So I read books, watched videos, connected with people about how to run businesses. And even though I did all of those things, the business progressed very slowly and I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. So I definitely did some of the stuff in the books that were recommended and stuff that other people said I should do. But other things I knew I should do, but for whatever reason, never did. So I started to think the problem was me. Maybe I just wasn't a business person. But I have a growth mindset. And quite frankly, I had made a big stinking deal about starting Strengths University. So I would have felt like an idiot quitting so soon. So instead, I decided to figure out how to change the things about myself that were getting in the way of my success. So I stopped focusing on just information about business and opened myself up to wherever the universe took me. And as I have connectedness in my top 10, that was pretty easy for me. When I did that, I started to see what I was missing wasn't just business related stuff. And it was through that journey that I developed our unique approach and the curriculum for the Supervisor Strengths Institute. And it was only after doing this that the business actually started getting on track. So it wasn't so much that I didn't have the knowledge to run a business, although that was certainly part of it. I needed to be the Anne who could run a business. I needed to have the identity of a successful business owner. And the Anne of 7 years ago did not have that. So I know we talk a lot about identity in higher education and really in society today. And typically that has to do with things like gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. And those certainly have their place in many discussions. But when I'm talking about identity here, I'm talking about who your subconscious believes you to be. I've talked about this before, but our subconscious mind runs our lives 95 to 99% of the time. It's in charge when we're running on autopilot. And what we do during those times is 100% impacted by the beliefs and values in our subconscious programming. That's what our identity is. And this may be, and often is, different than what we think, what we believe we value in our conscious brain. Our conscious brain can assess things and decide, I don't know about that. Or, no, I don't think that's right. Our subconscious brain cannot do that. It believes what it's been told to believe, and then it looks around for things to reinforce those beliefs. You've probably heard of confirmation bias, right? Well, that's what's going on. Basically, your subconscious gets a message about the world, who you are, your place in the world, and then it just looks for examples of how that's true. For example, when I was a supervisor on campus, I thought it was a pretty bleeping good one. So when I would think about myself in that role, I could see all the ways that it was true. And if something came up in my experience that didn't seem to align with that idea, that might make me think, oh, maybe I'm not a good supervisor, I'd pretty easily dismiss it and put it in a category of, well, that was somebody else's fault. Now, looking back, I still do think that I was a pretty good supervisor. But since my understanding of what effective supervisors do has expanded, I can more easily go back and identify situations where I probably wasn't being effective. So, what does this have to do with connectedness? And which is in the title, and supervising, and why I talk about all the things that don't seem to be directly tied to supervising. It's because whoever you are impacts how you'll interpret and implement what you learn about supervising, including not actually doing the things that you need to do. So that means that anything you learn about being a better supervisor, just logistically, has to be integrated into your identity, or you're not actually going to see any significant changes. In a nutshell, whatever your identity is now is how you show up in life. And you can say, for example, that you value your health. And your conscious mind might very well value that. But if you don't actually take care of your health, that's not truly part of your identity. It's aspirational identity, but it's not what's driving you every day. And so that's why you can know that you need to eat better, exercise more, sleep longer, whatever, but you don't do it. Your subconscious is shutting it down because it's saying, that's not who we are. And it's certainly not what we do. So, no. Now, one particularly challenging aspect of supervising for most people is holding their folks accountable. So Bob didn't do X, and now you have to talk to him about it. I can and have told you how to minimize this from happening and how to address it when it does happen more effectively. But if you've listened to those episodes, have you actually done those things? Will you do it? You won't if some aspect of this process goes against what your subconscious believes you to be or believes you should or should not be doing. Say you have a story about being bad at confrontation. I used to interview tons of RA candidates, and inevitably I'd ask, how do you deal with confrontation? And I was always a little shocked if someone would say, oh, I just avoid confrontation. I mean, it was honest, but it definitely seemed like a poor decision in an interview. But the point is, if that's you, if you avoid confrontation, if you're the type of person who avoids confrontation, then how are you going to confront someone? Even if I tell you exactly how to do it as a supervisor. And that's not to say you never will. Perhaps you have another story about how you're the responsible one. And if you're responsible, you have to do it. As long as the power of that second story is stronger than the one about avoiding confrontation, then you probably will. But it may not go very well. And it's going to be incredibly stressful for you. So that's why I talk so much about the stories you have. Until you upgrade those stories, aka beliefs, aka beliefs that you have about who you are, aka your identity, you're simply not going to be able to effectively do the things that I might tell you an effective manager does. So how does stress management and self-care come into all this? Well, our subconscious brain is way faster and a much more powerful processor than our conscious brain. So when we go into fight or flight, again, physiological response, we've talked about this before, otherwise known as the stress response, our subconscious brain is 100% in charge. And if it was truly an emergency, like, oh my God, saber-toothed tiger, you would want and need the speed of that processor, the subconscious brain, to be in charge to survive. You can't be waiting on the conscious brain like, oh man, there's a tiger there. What should we do? We don't have time for that. It has to be automatic pilot. But the problem is, most of our triggers, most of the things that send us into fight or flight are artificial. They're manufactured. We're not actually in any danger, but our brain is interpreting it that way. And in this whole process, your prefrontal cortex, your conscious brain, is turned off. Completely. That means there's no ability to assess any of those stories, any of those beliefs. There's no ability to assess, oh, would this truly be the best course of action? When you are stressed out like this, you may eat like crap, take zero breaks, doom scroll, stay up late, all those things. Even if you know, again, consciously, you know it's not the best thing for you, but your conscious brain isn't there to say, oh, wait a minute. I think it would be way more effective if we took a nap now, or if we ate something that's healthy. It has been shut down. It has zero say, it has zero voice. So whatever you do on autopilot, that's subconscious programming, and it's just going to do what it does. And that is why it is so important to manage your stress and keep your nervous system regulated. When it is, you have the ability to shift into that conscious brain and assess the situation. You can tell yourself, oh my gosh, I need a real lunch, not a Snickers bar. And this is just as true for work decisions. Say there's a student emergency. If you are in fight or flight, you may feel and even believe that you're just trying to do what's best for the student. But what's really happening is your brain is trying to help you survive that situation, which means it's not necessarily making the best decision. It's just the best decision to get you out of that situation alive, quote unquote. So let's go back to Bob. You know, Bob's performance isn't where it needs to be. You know that that probably negatively impacts the team. You even know that it's your job to address it. Regulated you can do what it takes to learn how to better navigate those situations and put those things into practice. Stressed out you, dysregulated you, has no such capacity. There is a good chance you'll justify not talking to him at all because you're too busy. Oh, maybe it's not that big a deal. You know, I have 4 other great employees. So the fact that Bob isn't that great, I'm still doing pretty good. And even if you do meet with Bob, again, maybe your sense of responsibility demands it, or HR demands it. The only thing your brain cares about in that experience is surviving the meeting, not getting a good outcome. It wants to check off the box. We did it. We're done. We survived. And again, that's typically not optimal for getting Bob to improve his performance. And the same thing goes with your talents. Those talent themes have the capacity to show up as strengths or weaknesses, or some people say, you know, the shadow side. I talk a lot about becoming more mindful about how your talent themes show up for you. So that way you can start to notice patterns, both good, positive, and ones that, you know, are not so great. And that information allows your conscious brain to assess, hey, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to upgrade so that my talent themes show up as strengths more often. But when your nervous system becomes dysregulated, AKA going into fight or flight, you have no control over how your talents show up. They're going to show up and do what they've always done in that situation, whether it's helpful or it's actually getting in your way. So my main point of this episode is that to upgrade how you supervise, you need to focus on more than just the facts, quote unquote, about how to better supervise. Knowing the skills, having the knowledge can be important, but it's really about who you are. And I want to take a second to clarify something about the subconscious here. Now, the way I've been talking about it so far, it seems like it's kind of a negative thing. Like it's just showing up, doing stuff, making a mess, and not letting you accomplish what you really want to do. And on one hand, that's absolutely true. But the ultimate goal is to align your subconscious programming, those habits, those beliefs, those values, with the outcomes you actually want. So your subconscious brain is actually invaluable for your survival. And just like we talked about before with the saber-toothed tiger, it's a faster and more powerful processor. So it can allow you to do a ton of things quickly and effectively. It helps manage your energy efficiently and really get where you want to go, but only when the stories, habits, etc., are aligned. with the results you want. When that happens, you get exactly what you want, even when you're on autopilot. So thinking about, oh my God, I did so many things today. I'm exhausted. But I can't even figure out what I did. That's because your stories, your values, your beliefs, your habits aren't aligned with the outcomes that you want. When you upgrade those things, at the end of the day, wow, I look at all the progress I made. Wasn't even aware I was doing it, but boom. So the topics I talk about in the podcast are designed to help you do just that. Align all of those things with the actual outcomes that you want. Yes, you need to know what you don't know about supervising to be effective, but you also need to understand what you might be doing to prevent yourself from putting that new knowledge into action. And unfortunately, there's not a book on that. You have to start paying attention, becoming more aware of how you show up and why, so you can upgrade the stories, beliefs, skills, habits, etc., that are going to allow you to get the outcomes that you want. You need to upgrade your identity so that knowledge is implemented consistently and automatically. So last week, we wrapped up our module on the basics of Clifton Strengths, the Supervisor Strengths Institute. And during our cohort call, we let folks know that this upcoming week, we're focusing on stress management and self-care. And because that tends to be a topic that is seemingly about you, we know that some folks, especially those of you who put others first, are tempted to skip it. So as we were wrapping up our call, Alicia very eloquently said, this week, we are talking about self-care. And you may feel like, oh, I already know about that, or I don't have time to do that. I'm here for the nitty-gritty on how to supervise. But if you cannot manage yourself and manage your own stress, you cannot and will not lead your team to the best of their ability or the best of your ability. End quote. So all of this to say, the topics, the episodes that are in this podcast have been carefully vetted through both my connectedness and my strategic talent themes to be applicable to every supervisor. Now, certain things might resonate more with you than others, and in general, I encourage you to honor that gut feeling. But if there are topics like emotions or self-care or digging into those stories or beliefs that make your brain say, no thanks, that's not for me, then I would encourage you to investigate why that is. And hint, our subconscious brain will 100% shut down anything that seems outside of our/its comfort zone, aka things that don't seem to align with our current identity. And if that's what's going on, there's a good chance that's exactly the most important place for you to do some work. Thank you for watching this episode of My Circus, My Monkeys. If you found this information helpful, please click that like button and share with a friend or colleague. And of course, please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. This podcast was created to support supervisors working in higher education and any field focused on growth and development. So if you want more information about Strengths University and how we can support you and your team, including our signature program, the Supervisor Strengths Institute, check out our website at www.strengthsuniversity.org or send me an email at Anne, that's ANNE, @strengthsuniversity.org. Thanks for watching and see you next time.